It was one of the 10 most deadly cyclones in modern times, and definitely the most ferocious to have hit Myanmar. Cyclone Nargis struck the Irrawaddy Delta in the evening of May 2nd, 2008, with winds of up to 140 kilometers per hour. More than 130,000 people lost their lives or were recorded missing. 2.4 million people were affected, losing family members, houses, boats, farms, animals, and entire livelihoods. Less than 2 weeks later, an earthquake measuring 7.9 on the Richter scale shook the Sichuan province of China. More than 70,000 people were killed and 370,000 injured. 2 major disasters had hit Asia within a few weeks, causing death, devastation, and despair. The Red Cross and Red Crescent responded immediately to both disasters. Lives were saved thanks to the presence of trained first aiders, relief workers, and pre-positioning of relief items in many areas. However, it was immediately clear that more lives could have been saved if communities were better prepared. They were not properly equipped for receiving and understanding early warning messages, had poor evacuation plans, and had identified too few emergency shelter locations. The impact of both disasters was aggravated by community practices, like destroying Myanmar's protective mangrove forests for firewood, and in China by the poorly regulated construction. As a result, many residential buildings and schools collapsed, causing unnecessary deaths of children and adults.
While it is difficult to prevent disasters, some, but of course not all, can be predicted. Our aim is to undertake actions before a disaster strikes to reduce its ultimate impact. We do this through actions at the community level, focusing on creating awareness within the members of the communities, undertaking actions in other sectors such as health initiatives, and preparing emergency preparedness plans. The strength of the Red Cross and Red Crescent lies within its network of volunteers. These are the people who are there before a disaster, during a disaster, and after disaster strikes, helping communities rebuild and build safer conditions for their livelihoods. The way that we do this ultimately is through working with local governments in the planning of actions, in the implementing of actions, and hopefully creating sustainability for the future.
The sheer forces of nature make it unrealistic to rule out any casualties and the destruction of infrastructure. But the Red Cross aims to mitigate the risk and to reduce the impact by undertaking work before a disaster happens. Preparing for disasters also means to take changing weather patterns into account. It's a fact that more and more disasters are weather-related, and that flooding, cyclones and typhoons now strike areas that have never been hit before. In some areas, these calamities are reoccurring events, but their impact has increased over the past few decades. The mighty Mekong River is a case in point. It is a source of livelihood for millions of people, but it can also be a source of death, particularly every year in the rainy season. It swells and overflows, bringing much-needed nutrients for agricultural production. At the same time, it causes severe floods. Red Cross volunteers have been trained to monitor the water level on markers placed in the river. These data are collected from point to point and transferred to the Mekong River Commission for National Early Warning. The volunteers are instructed to issue warnings once the water reaches dangerous heights. The volunteers have also been trained to organize and assist with evacuation and relief in times of flooding. During the dry season, the volunteers teach villagers on how to prepare for emergencies. This includes identifying safer areas for people, food, as well as providing training in first aid, hygiene, and health, including the danger of dengue fever and malaria. The Red Cross has planted more than 20,000 hectares of mangrove forests in 8 coastal provinces in Vietnam. The trees help to reverse the negative effects of unregulated development. even more importantly, mangroves are proven to reduce the impact of typhoons and storms, which batter Vietnam's long coastal line each year. They also help protecting sea dikes and property. School children are intentionally involved in these projects. They learn about the virtues of trees at school and are encouraged to plant them with their own hands in the muddy sands along the coast. It is almost impossible to directly measure the positive effects of disaster preparedness, but the impact of Typhoon Durian by the end of 2006 gave a clear indication. In terms of strength, it was the most destructive typhoon for a decade. It left thousands homeless in Vietnam, but only 68 people have lost their lives. 9 years earlier, the comparable Typhoon Linda claimed over 3,000 lives in the same area. The main reason why so few people died in 2006 was that the early warning system had worked. More than 600,000 people had been evacuated to shelters before the typhoon hit the area.
On February 2007, it was the first time my community also got the flooding. It never happened before. I think the weather is changing.
Indonesian Red Cross has always been a pioneer on climate change issues. It is part of a network comprising the Ministry of Environment, the National Meteorological Office, and several other agencies. This network strives to reduce the impact of weather-related disasters. The Red Cross is in the forefront, not only for relief and rescue, but also for preparedness and mitigation. Activities span from preventing outbreaks of dengue fever to very basic but efficient measures such as raising the doorsteps of houses in the poor areas of Jakarta. With these, the impact of the yearly occurring floods can be alleviated. Based in the Netherlands, the Red Cross and Red Crescent Climate Change Centre works closely with Red Cross in Indonesia. The centre assists educating and informing the public through community-based disaster preparedness and risk reduction programs.
This is the aim of our work, not only in Indonesia, but across the entire region. We're not only focused with the large disasters that have huge impacts and make the headlines, but we are more concerned with the smaller disasters that happen each day and have just as great an impact on those people affected.
The Red Cross always works in close cooperation with local communities. Experience has shown that the best way to achieve a reduction of disaster risk is through empowering individuals and communities to take the lead in deciding their own future. They identify their own ways in which they can live in harmony with the environment. One example is Laos. Red Cross staff and volunteers assisted community members to identify the risks within their village. They helped the villagers to understand how they have addressed these issues in the past and how they can better do it in the future. It is often the very simple actions that have a huge impact, like identifying safe evacuation points or raising the level banks. The villagers can complete these actions independently or with the assistance from local authorities or the Red Cross. Another example is the Philippines. Like its neighbours, the country has made great progress towards developing self-sufficiency in dealing with any kind of disasters. Red Cross volunteers in the Philippines use modern technology like GPS to access government land zone planning. They also use traditional local knowledge passed down through generations to reduce the risk and impact of future disasters. The Red Cross and Red Crescent movement is aware that it needs to do more in order to reduce the impact caused by disasters, small or big. National societies have two distinctive advantages: an auxiliary role to that of the government and a wide network of members and volunteers in every corner of the world. With this in mind, the Red Cross and Red Crescent is building on its successful experiences to develop new and improved approaches geared to reduce the impact of disasters. By now, 20% of all emergency appeals are allocated to risk reduction. This number illustrates how serious the movement has become about this issue. To reach the aim of building stronger and more resilient communities, our partners, such as those responsible for local planning, need to adopt disaster risk reduction with the same urgency as the Red Cross. The need for increased preparedness is strong and undisputed. Through the past few decades, the number of natural disasters and weather-related hazards has more than doubled. This trend is expected to continue.